Hey, welcome to another episode. It's always a pleasure to talk with individuals in the field of media, and it's my great pleasure to co-host with Dana Gagnon, who's the Government Programming Coordinator with Waycross Media TV. In Cincinnati and throughout the world, if you want to call it that. And
sure.
Dana, it's always a pleasure in talking with you. And I want to thank you very much. You brought some interesting information that we're going to be talking about today. And I just wanted to let you know that when I first got a TV, I was 7 years old, and this was back in 1957. And the TV had 3 channels. We couldn't believe this was phenomenal. 2 were from Cleveland, and 1 was from Columbus, and I lived in Coshocton. And then next thing you know, we get cable. And my father's paying $2 for the cable a month. And this allowed us to have 5 and then 10 channels. Oh, it was just phenomenal. And then next thing you know, we get 20 channels and cable increases, and my father's complaining, hey, he's got to pay $5 a month on this cable bill. And then color TV came in, and next thing you know, we have 20 channels and 30 and 40. And it's just phenomenal how the TV has grown with the different channels. Now we have a variety of different ways in seeing television. And I know that you probably, when you were born, had several TVs in the house, but you know,
we had one. We had one TV in the house.
Oh, okay.
And cable, and the difference from putting tinfoil on the rabbit ears.
Oh, you had rabbit ears.
Just right. Huh. And yes, we had that, and the special UHF attached.
Oh yeah.
And then we got cable. So like you, all of a sudden it was this wondrous world of different channels.
Yes, and we thought, oh, wow, we have now, back during your time, we had 3.5 super networks. NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox was just coming to be. Mm-hmm. And now when you look on the TV, I just can't believe how many different programs that are available on so many different channels. And
that's a really great segue, because Waycross Community Media is an access station. And as we talk about all those different channels, all those different channels have different purposes, and some of them are obvious. We remember that HBO used to be for movies, and MTV used to be for music video. I don't know what it is now, but and we knew each station had a purpose. And access stations are like that too. Each station has a purpose. You could have government access, public access, or educational access. And those are to serve the local parts of the community. So all those big master networks you're talking about, they are national. And then every city has a metropolitan networks. In Cincinnati, we have Channel 19 and Channel 12, and every city has its own networks. Those serve the greater metropolitan area. But if you're from a town in that area, a little neighborhood or a town, it's difficult to get your school district's information in detail on that kind of a channel. They can give you maybe a second on the news, or your school district's super duper football game because they made it to states. And to see that whole game is exciting to you because it's your neighborhood. It's not exciting to someone in a whole different metropolitan area, so they don't cover all of that stuff. So that's what these access stations for. It's to make the community accessible, hence the word. Access.
Did that come through the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission?
Yes. Actually, in 1984, there was and I want to say this correctly, there was a Cable Act. And what that Cable Act did is say, all these great new cable stations, these cable companies that are coming in to bring you HBO, and I think it was HBO and Spotlight, weren't they?
I think so.
Way back when.
Yeah.
And all those companies, they want to be the one in your neighborhood. So what the Cable Act says, they have to come to your town and come to an agreement with your town. And that way your town, as the franchise, I want to use the right word so I don't confuse things here, but your town can ask them for franchise fees to be allowed to be in their town. And what that means is your town can come with an agreement and say, okay, you can sell HBO in our town, but you also are going to give our schools free cable so we can use it for educational purposes. Or you're also going to put aside 3 channels so that we can have public access and we can have our neighborhood, our residents can make programs to get their views out and share them with their neighbors, kind of things like that. Our government can broadcast its meetings to make sure that all the community citizens can keep in touch, even if they can't make it to every single town meeting, kind of thing like that. And that was part of the franchise agreement. A cable company would come to a town, they would have rules, and that agreement included the funding that would come from the cable company to your town, and that's what pays for these access stations.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's important because that's what right now the FCC is proposing a rule change. And if you hear about it from the cable companies, it sounds like a really great idea. But if you realize that it actually affects that protected funding for your access stations, these access stations for most citizens are the only way they can get complete, thorough information that's just related to their own community.
I tell you what, you brought up some slides. Sarah, behind the scenes, our magician, can you show the one slide that starts with the FCC? What that's about? And here's what it's basically saying, just like what you said, that it requires or may require cable operators to set up the channels. If we'll go to the next slide, there's your public educational or your public access. Yes. The next one talks about educational access. We're a university, Ohio State University, along with University of Rio Grande. So we would fall under that educational access.
So you hear it called public access, educational access, and government access. It just means each of those are a different kind of access station, but they're all connected to your community, depending on whether or not that one focuses on government content, your city council, your trustees, the local stuff, what you're not to hear about at the higher levels. But also educational access, your school in Waycross Community Media covers all kinds of events for 2 different very large school districts, and their concerts, their sports, their graduations. Also, we do programs for them. We do a podcast every single month for one of the school districts, and then we get to
very good, excellent
students and things like that. So that means helps them get their information out in a way that they did not necessarily have an avenue to do without us being available.
So the cable systems, actually the dollars that my father and I pay and you pay for the cable systems, certain amounts of that money should go to to allow for the expense of the airways.
Exactly. So that's exactly where the money comes from. Cable actually likes to put on your bill a little thing that says like access fee or something like that. They're collecting it. The cable company is collecting it from us as the subscriber to the cable. But however they collect it, they're required to pay a franchise fee because the cities that they operate in, they're using some of that city space. They're using some of that city right of way, and they have permission to operate in their city. So that's what the franchise fee is for. Now, the regulations in the '84 Act said that fee has to be capped at 5% of the gross cable revenues. So there is a rule on that will top how much that city can charge the cable company.
I see.
That's good. That's fair. What the proposed rule change is, though, is what they can count as payment, what the cable company can count as payment. And what the cable company wants to be able to do is count against their 5% some in kind. So they want to say, you know what? We're giving you this franchise fee of X amount of dollars, but we want to count towards that X amount of dollars the current market value of those 3 access stations we're giving you. That's not how the math was originally designed to be done, and that will cut so much funding from so many access stations nationwide that most of them will just cease to exist, because the fees, the 5% right now is the franchise fee. Actual money, that's what we would consider it to be, and that's what it's been for the last more than 10 years. And they want to say, yeah, okay, but if our fee is this much, let's first take out of it the market value of the channels. Now we're just going to give you that much. That much isn't enough to operate the station on. And the budgets have not been done to allow for that. So most of these access stations, and it's really going to affect small areas. It's going to affect rural areas where they're not getting coverage from any kind of national things. But really, even we're here in the greater Cincinnati area. We have a lot of metropolitan stations. Metropolitan stations don't cover the local town governments at the level they do.
Just out of curiosity, the fees where do they pay those fees? Do they pay them to the school systems? Do they pay them to government?
Good question. The cable company pays the fee to the government, and then the government decides. Now, and I mean the government, the municipality, the small town, the large town, wherever, the township, the city, and then the municipality decides how they are going to provide those access services. And so 4 communities here in our area, Springfield Township, Coleraine Township, Forest Park, Green Hills, they provide their access services through Waycross Community Media. There are other townships that choose ICRC as another local station, and they choose that. And different access stations have different capabilities. A lot of it has to do with their funding, though. And when that funding disappears, what we can do disappears. The things that we cover, we actually use a whole army of volunteers so that we can cover things at the depth that we cover. To be honest, we cover things at a greater depth than many access stations do. But our staff is very small, but we use a whole army of volunteers to help us do things like big truck shoots of sporting events and concerts and things like that. And also creating our own studio programs, which a lot of access stations don't have the ability to put together.
So if a cable system, let's take the community where I live, where the access, the educational access program, it's available, but the cost of doing something for the high school is tremendous. Are you saying that there's a possibility that money could be going to the high school or could be going to the municipality, but it's not being used for that? I'm sort of confused.
Yeah, actually, there are situations where municipalities will collect the franchise fee and then not necessarily decide that it's the best idea for their budget to contract with someone to provide those services. If you're in an area where your community access station is very, very small, and I mean like some of them are very, very small and just don't have the same resources to go out and cover things at the level you might imagine, it's almost always because they just don't have the funding. You need a staff to go out and cover things. And even when you use volunteers, you need staff to go be the point person, to go be responsible for the equipment, to train volunteers.
Sure.
But even a lot of small stations, though, will say, hey, we understand. We want to get that on our channel, too. We think this high school concert is important. We don't have staff, but I'll tell you what, come over to the station. I bet I could train you on a camera and teach you how to go do it. That's actually one of the biggest things. And again, I don't want to speak for other stations. They're all,
I understand.
They're going to say, why did you tell them that? But volunteering really is the way to keep access.
Very true.
To continue to make things happen. I guess I didn't forget well. This funding, this proposed new rule / funding, and that's really important to talk about because there won't be anyone for you to go to talk to about volunteering. Keep us there.
Yeah.
Make sure even the little stations, even when there's just 1 or 2 people and a little bit of equipment, those people almost always want to hear from their community and say, hey, can you show me how to run a camera? I would be willing to go out and film that.
I very much tend to agree. You know, in our programming here and with Ohio State University South Centers and University of Rio Grande, we have over 50 volunteer hosts on our 39 or so programs that we do. And yeah, it's I very much agree with you. You brought something also on one of the slides that sort of breaks down, because there's a lot of confusion about what is public broadcasting system, what's NPR, what's educational access. And so if we could have Sarah bring up those slides that start, they're about...
While Sarah brings that up too, I'm just going to throw this out.
Okay.
Action points. And so we're talking about this. We're talking about how we've really got to let the FCC know that we think these stations have value and they're important. So I want to make sure I tell you how.
Okay, great.
Really long, complicated website, but we made it easier so you don't have to remember it. If you go to ours, which is waycross.tv/FCC.
Oh, okay.
You just go to that, waycross.tv/FCC. You'll find a link that goes to a spot where you can actually just click on something, put in your zip code, and they'll tell you which U.S. senator is yours.
Oh, okay. Great. Oh, that's great. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, here was the slide that you have. Public educational access television is traditionally a form of non-commercial mass media. What you're talking about is it should be geared toward the specific market. If we can go to the next slide. It was created, public access television was created between 1969 and 1971. And so obviously the day you were born, Dana, was the day that this was created. We can go to the next one. And then they provide local content, increasingly underserved, and that's very true in our rural area, in the fact that we don't have really many accesses. It's transparency, so citizens can monitor local government actions. Next one, please. They help prevent media deserts in towns. And sometimes we have that, especially because of the newspaper, not the decline, but the newspaper is really going to the way of the internet.
That's a really good point. These become more important than ever because we used to count on the local newspaper to do well, it's not going to get covered on the main network, but at least I'll see it in my local newspaper.
And let's continue on.
And so this is all just what we were talking about just now. And It's the fancy description of this rule change proposition, docket NR 105311. But go ahead and keep going through that, yeah.
So here we have the breakdown of community broadcast channels. And this is where a lot of people get confused. Are you a PBS station?
That's a really great question. So PEG stations are not the same as your PBS station. And PBS stations have different sources of funding. They can have federal funding, they can have grants, they can have all kinds of, because they have a broader appeal. Yes, you're seeing shows from all over the place, but they do not cover your local neighborhood.
That's true.
Abbey, which is fantastic. You can watch, Masterpiece Theater, which I love, but you're not ever going to see your town council on PBS.
That is true. So a PBS public broadcast houses NPR stations, and they have anywhere from $1.5 million to $10 million annual budget. Can you imagine what Waycross?
I'm swooning.
If we
Can we just have a little bit of it?
And so government access channels, GAC, are programs that are inherent in governmental programs in communities, correct?
Yes, so this is what we're talking about. This is the government access.
Okay.
It's one of the three types of access that we talked about. And yes, this is that channel that plays your city meetings. And in some towns it plays more than that. And for ours plays more than that. But this is important because those city meetings mean what decisions your city councilors, your trustees, what they're making about your town. Okay. That's the government that affects you the most directly. We talk about government, we talk about what's going on at the federal level, and I don't think I can connect to that, or I can't make any influence on that. This is the government you can directly influence in your neighborhood. You can call those people on the phone, you can chat with those people in person. So it's important to have access to that.
And the next slide, it shows the educational access.
Yes. And also, when you talk about community access, how is that important too? If we look a little bit at the history of where access channels came from, if you were Joe Schmo and you lived in a neighborhood and you had some really important ideas that you wanted to express to the world or to your community, how could you do that? When we're talking about the world of cable in the 80s, the television is the way you can reach a broader audience. And the television is still that way. We have YouTube now, we have the internet now, but you still can only reach the people you direct it to specifically on those platforms. Television is how you can reach a local community of people.
Okay.
So that's where that community access or the public access comes in.
And then there's the educational access. It was interesting. The educational access is usually housed in high schools, if I'm not.
We have some that are. There was one here in the Cincinnati area that was in the high school, and their facilities where you had to buzz through and to get into a high school to get through there. That's a nice combination if it exists, because then you can apprentice those high school kids and give them the chance to get involved in the industry, maybe then come to OSU to go to college for it. There's your plug for you.
Thank you.
Here for you. But many educational access is like here. It's combined with Waycross Community.
Yes.
Provides all those functions, and that way, since we're offsite, we go into the schools a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm scheduled to go into one of our school districts 2 different days next week and go cover some things there. But it also means that they can come here and use facilities, and we for things beyond that. Kind of resources.
Very good. So the next slide shows cable TV. And,
yes.
They are our friends because they do provide the franchise fees.
We would not be here without them. That's
right. And they are on air. They allow us to be on air in some of their. But they the nice thing is that they are not charging us much.
So, right. And so actually the very definition you have on this slide here provides community educational and public access airwaves at no cost. That is how it exists now. That's the reason they do that is because they had to negotiate when they came into the town and the town said, yep, you're going to do this. You're going to provide that access. The proposed rule change says, I think actually we're going to put a price tag on that access and subtract that from our franchise fee, and that will reduce funding a lot. That will make some of those access stations disappear, which is why that's not what we want to see.
Right. And so then the next one is commercial TV stations.
Yes.
And these are those stations that charge advertisement, or they charge certain fees to watch them, etc.
Right, so we know where their budget comes because we watch their ads, and that's where their budget comes from.
And then finally, let's see, on the live streaming, that's really the new hope for many educational access programs, is going on the internet, etc. Again, we're running out of time, Dana, and I really appreciate all the information. Unfortunately, you gave me more questions to want to ask than the answers that you provided. So again, and we'll do our best to put it at the bottom when you look at the video where you can go. We can go to I'll
say it again. It's waycross.tv/FCC. And if you go there, it'll link you right to a page. No matter what area you live in, you can put all over the country. You can put in your zip code, and it will say, "Oh, this is the senator you need to send it to."
And I encourage everyone to do that. We take for granted the public educational, the public community, and the public government channels. And they do provide information, not to everyone, but they provide information that's specific to us. Mm-hmm. And once we lose that right, we'll never get it back.
And I have a little anecdotal story if we have a second.
Okay.
We've been covering sports. Waycross has been here since 1982. So we have an archive of things we've been covering over the years. And I got a request the other day for a DVD from a gentleman who played a basketball game we covered in 1996. He was we had it on VHS, mind you, so I had to convert it. But he had forgotten. He was interviewed at the end of the program. And so that was a surprise to him. But that's a moment. We have the whole game. It was a very exciting game. We have the whole game. We don't have just a picture from it, we have the whole game for his treasure. But also, he watched it. He was taken aback because he had forgotten that his grandmother, who has since passed away, was there cheering for him. He's watching it, and we have a shot of her cheering in the stands. We didn't know. It's the first time he's seen her since she passed away, and he called us back. He just had to tell us he ordered more games. He wanted to know, what else do you have? But that, to me, says this is what we're doing. We're capturing the moments in our community. We aren't just capturing big media moments that are marketable. We're capturing the everyday moments in our local community, and that became a treasure that he didn't even know existed.
That is fantastic, and I truly believe 300 years from now, these videos that we're doing now will be very, very important to somebody's collection.
We hope so.
Dana, it's always a pleasure. We're talking with Dana Gagnon. She's a government programming coordinator with Waycross TV in Cincinnati and Wake Forest, and really appreciate your taking the time to talk with us about better understanding public and education and government access programs.
Thanks again for having me.
Well, thank you. I'm Patrick Dengel, and we hope to see you soon.